Okay, in terms of stuff, deadlines, unchangified, so except for the ones that have passed. So exam 2, quizzes part 3, deadline November 16th, end of day. Exam 3, exam 4, quizzes part 4, December 7th, end of day. And then the exciting exam 5, the end of the normal final time, available online. And then for the paper, same as it's always been, if you wish to do a draft, November 9th, deadline for that. November 14th, deadline for the +5. Then November 21st, deadline for the emergency deadline. And then of course December 8th, the desperation deadline. Before pressing on to the new stuff, namely more Descartes, so sort of new old stuff or old new stuff, anything about the previous stuff, or stuff to be, that needs more stuff. Okay, so this time we're looking at our good dead friend Descartes, who was French and then died, and of course is still dead and still French. Or maybe he changed his nationality. Who knows how that works. But as mentioned, he ended up dying in 1649 after getting his dream job because it was very cold and she had to get up really early. So, quite dead. Now, Descartes, before he died, he wrote a lot of stuff. He was a busy fellow. And all of them are pretty decent. 1620, Rules the Direction of the Mind. 1633, Le Monde, or in English, The World. And then in 1637, he got out of hand with his titling, with the discourse and the method of rightly conducting one's reason, and seeking the truth in sciences. And for a while, really long book titles were a thing. And then people realized no one likes that. There's no need of that. And so it was shortened down to Discourse on the Method, and today it's generally shortened down just to Discourse. 1641, his greatest work, Meditations on First Philosophy, some shortened down just to Meditations. And then 1644, The Principles of Philosophy, and 1649, The Passions of the Soul. And then done. All his works, if you want a complete set of Descartes' works, there's a 3-book set that is all the Descartes. Or if you don't want to pay for it, you just go on to like Project Gutenberg and get all the Descartes for free. It includes all his works, all his letters, and pretty much all that stuff. So what was Descartes up to before he met his untimely death? Well, during the time Descartes was Descarting, it was known as or still known as the modern era. It was after, Middle Ages, you had ancients, then you had, the Roman Empire, then it collapses in Europe, and then you get the Middle Ages, and then you get the Enlightenment, and what's called the modern era. And now we're in the postmodern era because we're after that one. And during the Enlightenment, thinkers like Descartes and Galileo and Locke and Hobbes and so forth, kind of their deal was they were dissatisfied with the current situation in science and philosophy. They looked at the past and said people were too much focused on the authority of the church, the authority of Aristotle, and said it's time for a change. It's time for a revolution in science and philosophy. Now, part of the concern was that previous thinkers, although there were many innovative thinkers, for the most part they were kind of content to just say, this is what the church says, this is what Aristotle said, and appealing to authority. So even though there was no work done, a lot of it was simply recycling and trying to figure out what did the old dead guys say about this, which is a mark of sort of cultural stagnation. When people are just talking about what people are talking about, then you're not getting much innovation. Second concern was, is that even though people have been talking about what people were talking about way back, everything was in dispute and everything was doubtful. Because you could find authorities saying one thing on one subject, the exact opposite on another, and so there was a curse of uncertainty. Now we also saw this back in the ancient day of the sophists. They pointed out a similar thing. There are the good arguments for one position, the good arguments against it. Everything is chaotic. How do we know? Now, unlike the sophists who said, let's just go with success, Descartes took a different view. His view was, since everything is disputed, doubtful, and in chaos and dispute, what we need is order. We need to create a solid foundation and get some certainty. So he believed that science and philosophy were built on, well, I'll use a couple metaphors. One view is kind of like it's built on sand, so everything is kind of collapsing. Or also the house of science and philosophy is all rickety and poorly constructed, despite all the centuries of being built. So what does he want to do? Well, what sort of shaped what he wanted to do was his travel. Now he did some travel in person. As I mentioned, he joined armies, met people and killed them. That was exciting. But he also went on an intellectual journey in his own mind. And what he wanted to do was clear out all these old ideas that were dubious and end up with the ultimate truth. Now he believed that if you go on this journey, he believes anyone can do it. So one of his contributions was anybody can go on this intellectual journey, but he believed, as all people who are utterly confident in their views are, that everyone will end up in the same place. Everyone will reach the same truths. So what kind of stuff did he do? Well, what he wanted to do, as I mentioned, was this. Metaphorically, he's like walking along saying, oh look, we have all this science and philosophy, and it looks great from a distance. It's this awesome appearing structure, this massive thing built upon by centuries. But then when he gets closer, he gets very disappointed, because he can see it's all rickety and kind of swaying in the wind, and it's all kind of cobbled together. And he realizes the foundations are full of cracks, and it's on a cliff that's about to fall in the sea. So he's like, whoa, that's not so great. That's pretty terrifying. So what he wanted to do was sweep all that away, push it off into the sea, and then build a brand new solid foundation for science and philosophy. Now many people who like Descartes and spend their career talking about Descartes regard him as the father of modern philosophy, because one reason is this. As I mentioned before, many of the previous thinkers would just quote even more previous thinkers saying this is why it's correct. And Descartes, he doesn't, if you go through meditations, he's not quoting people. He'll sometimes refer to other people, but there's not much in the way of quotations. So he doesn't rely on arguments for authority. He doesn't say this is true because Aristotle said it, or because Saint so-and-so said it. He makes his own arguments. So one hallmark of, obviously, kind of like revolution in science and philosophy and politics is not simply going with what everyone else said and did, but doing new stuff. Now, he also presented kind of a new model for philosophy, although not entirely new, which is this. That is that you can be a solitary thinker, thinking about the thinky stuff, and get these great philosophical truths. So the idea of philosophy being a solitary pursuit, although other philosophers have done this, he's not the first, he really gets it down on paper. As we looked at our good dead friend Socrates, for Socrates, philosophy is like a party. It's always better with more people. And they would hang out and talk and engage in conversations. In Descartes' view, you just kind of go off by yourself and think about stuff. And both models do have appeal. Sometimes it's good to be social and bounce ideas off other people and hear what they have to say. Other times you just want to think your own thoughts and not hear the roar of the crowd. Now, one of his major contributions, which has affected philosophy papers to this day, that people have been doing this long, I forget about other fields, is that in philosophy papers you can use personal pronouns. You can say, I think, I believe. You can talk about yourself. In most other fields, I believe they discourage that. They say you have to not do that. We don't care what you think. We want what other people think. But in philosophy, you can totally do this. Philosophers do that all the time, which can be seen as kind of cool because it's about you and your ideas. On the other hand, it can be seen as a bit, egotistical because it's all about, oneself. Now, he believed you could find the truth within yourself, kind of like in Kung Fu Panda. The secret ingredient, I guess, is us. And again, he believed that if you go off on these intellectual journeys, he was an objectivist about truth. He doesn't think everyone will go off and find different truths. He thinks it all leads to truth. So everybody can take the same journey, well, a different journey to the same place. Or so we claim. So its ultimate goals, which I've hinted at before, is this. Again, metaphorically speaking, the structure of science and philosophy is a massive edifice built upon thousands of years. But it's a rickety structure cobbled together, built on a foundation that's full of cracks on a cliff of sand by the sea. And so it's ready to topple over. Everything is uncertain and dubious. And Descartes, crudely put, wants to just kind of push that sucker into the sea and then start over. Put down a solid foundation and then build a new shining edifice of certainty in the sciences and philosophy. So it's quite a noble goal. Get rid of all the doubt and uncertainty and build essentially perfect science, perfect philosophy. So objective 1, find certainty. Objective 2, create a universal science that covers everything. Now these two goals are still goals people pursue today. People still crave certainty, and they're still trying to create the universal science that sciences everything. Although ambitions are a little less today. For example, in physics, typically people in physics are trying to find a theory that explains like all of physics as opposed to everything. But there's still this dream of sort of this ultimate science that explains everything. Now another goal on his part arose because when he was Descarting, religion was still, pretty strong, even though the Middle Ages have been, gone beyond, and we're now in the Enlightenment, and you're getting a rise of humanism. There's still a lot of faith, and of course even today, still a lot of faith. But then you've got, of course, this new scientific view, and on the scientific view, the universe is mechanical. It's a mechanistic universe of math and matter in motion. Physics. The idea being that if you look at people like Galileo and Newton, you can explain all the physical stuff by formulas, equations, and so forth. Again, mathematics, matter, in motion. But there's also this thirst, this desire to keep religion and also freedom. And Descartes, pretty smart guy, he realized if you have a mechanistic, deterministic world, there's really no room, as Thomas Hobbes pointed out, for God or freedom. And so there is this clash between, on one hand, the desire for sciencey stuff, on the other, desire for freedom. And so what Descartes wanted to do was reconcile those two, to make the world safe for freedom, religion, and science. And like many other thinkers during this time. Now, what some thinkers did, like Tommy Hobbes, he just tossed out freedom and religion. He just, we're not free. Everything is deterministic, there is no free will. If God exists, he's a material God for a material world, and he just chucked all that stuff. And most other thinkers during that time were religious and scientific, so they wanted to have both. And this is a conflict, a struggle that still goes on today. How do you have your science and your freedom and religion? And kind of interestingly, the Vatican actually does some pretty good science. And there are scientists who are very religious, but of course there are also scientists who are very atheistic. And religious people who are very anti-science. So how's he going to do all this fantastic stuff? Well, you probably heard of Descartes before, like way back in geometry. I don't know if you've heard much about him, but he's the guy that came up with the Cartesian coordinate system. All the geometry stuff. So Descartes, in addition to his philosophy stuff, was also a big math guy, the Cartesian coordinate guy. Now, since everybody really loves math, he figured, hey, let's use math to solve all these problems. So his model was mathematics, even more specifically geometry. So why did he like it? Well, he liked it because math has got a couple things going for it that he wants. One is, it seems to have absolute certainty. For example, if you add 2 and 2, what are your chances of getting 4? Yeah, 100%. If you draw a triangle correctly, what are your chances of it having 3 sides? Yeah, so it seems really certain. Also, math, at least to people who do the math stuff, there's a claim that it's self-evident. Not that things are obvious, but that once you understand it, you just see the truth. So we really like math. Other thinkers of this time, like Tommy Hobbes, for example, also really like math. Because who doesn't like math? Well, probably most people. Now in his work, the discourse on method, etc., he works out these methods. And he thinks that mathematics, this is why he picks it for his philosophical method, involves two mental operations. That is, our mind is doing two types of things. And these are kind of stolen from Plato. Thing one is this. We use a rational intuition. In other words, we see the self-evident truths. And again, self-evident need not be like obvious. As other thinkers have pointed out, self-evident just means that once you understand it, you see it, but getting to that point may take a lot of work, may not be obvious. And so he thinks when you're doing math, there are some things we just get by rational intuition. We just somehow see it. And that's stolen straight from Plato. And this does run into the usual problem of how do you know when something is just being bathed in the light of natural reason and when one is just like having a stroke or crazy or something. And still kind of working on that. So these are things that you just see the truth. You know they're true because you can see the truth. The second operation is also stolen away from Plato, which is deductive reasoning. Deductive logic, which is, well, actually math is part of deductive logic, but it's all about doing the reasoning in those steps. So he thinks if you take those two things and combine them together, you can get to all the truths. How do you do it? Well, basically you get a engine of truth. You find truths through intuition, then you plug them into valid reasoning, deductive arguments, and we know from the ancient days of part one, if you have a valid argument, and you put it on all true premises, you get truth. Yeah, so a valid argument, if there are such that if all premises are true, the conclusion must be true. So if you plug in true premises, all true premises into a valid deductive argument, you get a true conclusion. And then you get another truth, and then you take more truths, plug them into deductive arguments, you get another truth, and you keep on going. You just keep on making truth. It's a truth machine. And so his approach is solid enough, namely, yes, if you do know that the evidence, the premises are all true, and you plug them in a deductive argument that's valid, it's sound, then you get a true conclusion. You take that one, plug that and other ones into more arguments, and you keep on going. It's just a matter of theory, it's just a matter of time, and eventually you thought you'd get all the truths, or so we claimed. So his method itself is, again, solid. If you know things are true somehow, and you put them in valid arguments, you get truth. You just keep making truth all day. So how does this intuition stuff work? Well, again, these are self-evident truths, and you somehow see them. And as I mentioned before, going back to Plato and earlier, this is wicked mysterious. How do you know it works? I mean, it'd be handy if it worked kind of like in video games, where like the stuff you're supposed to get, or that you can pick up, glows. It'd be handy if you could just it'd be like convenient, like you read something that's like a convenient glow or sparkliness. You say, yep, definitely sparkly truth. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to work like that. So, kind of a problem. Now, where do we get these from? Well, since they're self-evident, we don't have to derive or deduce them. Again, we just somehow mysteriously see the truth. Some of these come from God. Descartes believed that there's ideas written in our soul that come from God. And these ideas, when you recognize them, dig them out, you'll see that they're true. Their truth just shines on through. Now he does note, because the person might say, well, I don't seem to have this stuff. And Descartes would say, well, you're not always aware of these ideas. You might have to go in and look for them, because self-evident doesn't mean obvious. Now, much like Plato, he also believed you don't get them from the senses. And there is this mysterious and kind of unexplained intellectual vision, kind of like an X-ray vision. You just see the truthiness. So, really useful, but again, the big problem is super mysterious. I mean, how does this actually work? What's the mechanism? How do you actually tell when something is self-evident, or whether you just really, really like it, or you're having a stroke or something? Now, deduction, of course, is really solved. Namely, if we do deductive reasoning, valid argument, plug in self-evident truths, we get truth. And we can keep doing this until we get enough truth that we can plug into more deductive arguments, and we just keep on going. Now, he believed that you could get all truths through deduction. And one reason why that's important is because, well, this would give us absolute certainty. So kind of the dream would be, you could go and do science and philosophy with self-evident truths, plugged into deductive arguments, getting more truths, and then you just keep generating truths. And eventually you'd have all the truths, they'd all be 100% certain, and there'd be no doubt whatsoever. You'd have a perfect foundation and a perfect gleaming structure of ultimate science and philosophy. And he thought we could get all knowledge this way. Now, his project, as I mentioned when he talked about our good dead friend Leibniz, his project in some ways similar to Leibniz, only without the computer stuff. The idea would be, and what these views have in common, is if somehow you had the right logic, the right language, and you had the starting truths, you could process them and get all of the truths. Now, back when Descartes and Leibniz were Leibnizing and Descarting, they didn't have, the computers we have today. And so people today are in a way kind of still trying to continue this project, because if you get enough programming power, put in enough data, you can get all the answers. Now, of course, what most people are interested in today is getting answers about how to sell us more crap so they can make more money, sell us crap through Facebook or Google. But it's a similar project, although the point of the project today is to make money through exploiting data about people. So, super evil. But there's still people who are trying to, find out knowledge about other stuff too. They don't have as much money though, because figuring stuff out doesn't pay as well as selling people crap. Sad. Now, Descartes' most famous work is, of course, Meditations on First Philosophy. It has 6 chapters, Meditations 1 through 6, and he claims that he did this all in like 6 days. That's based on these 6 dreams he had, which of course is a lot, because he actually wrote it over the course of a decade. But it's a good selling story. And it corresponds to the 6 days of Holy Week of the Jesuits, because he has had a Jesuit education, hence 6 days. And then I guess on the 7th day he rested. Now, we'll look at the entirety of Meditation 1, because that's the skeptical part, and we'll talk later on a bit about some of the other bits. If you want to get the full Descartes 6 meditations, epistemology class offered in the spring, we do all 6 of them. Because, epistemology. So Descartes begins the first meditation by laying out his goal, his objectives, how he's going to do it. And we've already seen some of this, but this is what he says. In his own personal case, he's realized that he's had all these beliefs, and he's pretty confident in them. And it's true of pretty much everybody. We start out, we learn some stuff, and then we think we're done. We've learned all the stuff. All our beliefs are set. We've got the truth. It's just a matter of waiting until we get that job and then die. But then he realized, upon reflection, that he kept realizing his beliefs were mistaken, that they were doubtful. So, based on that experience, what he wants to do is 2 things. Goal 1, get rid of all opinions that are dubious. anything that's not absolutely certain. And kind of his big goal, beyond just like himself, is again to build that solid foundation for the sciences, to have absolute certainty upon which to build absolute science. So how's he going to do this? Well, as you saw, math. But he has a particular method here. And he's using, to go back to previous week, methodological skepticism. So here's how he does it. He's going to try to show that his beliefs are false, the ones that can be doubted. So he's going to try to doubt them. Now, one approach would be to try to take every single belief and try to disprove that. But Descartes was aware that would be undoable because too many beliefs. And of course, there's also a thing, you have beliefs about your beliefs, so it would take an infinite amount of time. So what's he going to do? Well, he thinks that what he can do is, to use a modern metaphor, he's going to try to like implode his beliefs. Like if you ever seen a building taking down, the old way they would do it is just like, well, really old way was just like smashing with hammers, and eventually they got like the wrecking balls. But what they do whenever they can, because it saves so much time, is put explosives on the main supports, detonate those, and the building just goes, although sometimes it goes unexpectedly, because life is full of little surprises like buildings falling the wrong way. And so Descartes, in a way, is trying to do that. He knows that his beliefs have certain foundations, structures hold them up. If you take out the key structures, you don't have to like break every single brick in the metaphor. You take out the key structures, all it collapses. So he doesn't have to engage every single belief, he's just got to take out the foundation. Now he's going to adopt as his method extreme skepticism. Now not as a matter of practical life, so he's not going through life like as a practical matter doubting everything. Again, this is his philosophical method. So he's going to set extremely high standard. So anything that's not absolutely certain, he's going to treat as if it was manifestly false. So it's not perfectly absolutely certain, it's going to be tossed. Now again, this is not how he goes through life. It's not like Descartes walking along saying, I don't know if there's like a cliff here, I'll just walk off it. Is the cliff, not walking off of that. But it's when he's sitting safely in his room, testing his beliefs. Because what he wants to do is find absolute certainty, and what he's doing is basically testing to destruction. To use a metaphor. If you were an engineer researching metals, and you wanted to find the metal, the strongest metal of all, what you would do is you would try to create metal alloys and try to destroy it. If you found a metal alloy you couldn't destroy at all, no matter what you did, you would say that's probably indestructible. So you're destroying stuff, not to destroy it, but to find the strongest metal. And Descartes doing the same thing here. He's trying to destroy his beliefs, not to destroy them, but to find the indestructible belief, the belief that cannot be doubted.
Was he planning on like going back to his beliefs, or just he was just proving a point about the belief?
Well, his hope was that he would doubt them all, but then be able to reconstruct them all again. Because he ends up kind of a spoiler. He ends up in the end not radically. He doesn't. It's not like a radical journey where he like ends up with just like a totally new person with totally different radical beliefs. He ends up basically, he starts off believing in God, ends up believing in God. Starts off believing in the world, ends up believing in the world. So he kind of goes through this radical process to go back where he was. I mean, use an analogy, it'd be like someone saying, I'm going to do something super wild and crazy, and they go and just like drink some tea. They're like, but they go through like a wild process, and they're like, going back to drinking that tea, that's all I really need, it's like that tea. Yeah, so he goes through this extreme process, but he ends up back pretty much where he started. He doesn't like throw out his beliefs and end up being super radical. Which would have been kind of cool if he ended up breathing all kinds of crazy stuff at the end. But yeah, he ends up basically back where he was. But he thinks that now he has absolute proof that he's right about where he was.
And he's saying that if people do the same thing he did, they're going to end up going back to themselves.
Well, he ended up where he ended up. they'll believe what he believed. They'll believe in, he thinks on believing in God with absolute certainty, and then all the beliefs he has about math, etc. He thinks it all leads to the same way. And I mean, it's common for people to think that everyone, if they find the truth, coincidentally, will be exactly what they already believe. Not everyone else will find the same exact beliefs. So, he's going to try to, again, take out the foundation of his past beliefs. And the idea, again, is, because examining every single belief would be impossible, it would take way too long. And so he thinks if he can slice the foundation, that will take care of it. So what is the foundation of his beliefs that he is going after, that he thinks is a cause of all this doubt and uncertainty? Well, the answer is, much like Plato gave, the senses. Because he says that everything that he believed before, he relied on his senses, basically empiricism. But he ends up rejecting it in favor of rationalism. And he ends up going through a series of, well, three main arguments, although there's a lot of sub-arguments. But there are three main sort of levels. There's the sense argument, the dream argument, and then the demon argument, the three biggies. So the first argument about the senses is this. And again, what his method is, he's going to take a belief, or the foundation of his belief, if he can find any reason to doubt it, whoosh, it's gone. Again, this is a matter of, like engineering. To use the metaphor, if you're an engineer trying to find an unbreakable substance, you wouldn't go home and break all your stuff, because that would be stupid. You'd do that in the lab. And so he's kind of in the lab, breaking his beliefs, but he doesn't really apply it to just normal, like when he goes out to get a sandwich, he doesn't apply it there. So what's the first argument? Well, it's an argument by example. He says, at times the senses deceive us. And he gives a whole bunch of examples of optical illusions. And they're, of course, the usual things that everyone's experienced. For example, if you have a glass of water, and you put a straw in it, and you look through the glass, the straw looks like it's bent. But you know it's not. If you stand on railroad tracks, which is generally a bad idea if there are trains, and you look down them, they seem to meet, but you're pretty sure they don't. There are, of course, also ones that did at Descartes' time, like if you're driving on a road, a tar road that's hot, you can see what appear to be puddles of water, but they're not. And of course, there are entire books with all kinds of optical illusions in them that are more elaborate, like the one where you stare at a page with squares, black squares on my paper, and you stare at it enough, you start seeing gray squares between them, and those types of things. Or the classic one with the arrows. We have two lines that the lines are actually exactly the same length, but they look longer because of the way the arrows go, and various other ones. And Descartes points out correctly that, yeah, our senses do deceive us. We are fooled by optical illusions. So what he does is, he, by analogy, says, well, if something deceives you, you shouldn't trust it. Senses deceive us, like if a person is deceiving you, shouldn't trust them. The senses deceive us at times, so we shouldn't trust them. Now, at each stage of doubt, Descartes is careful, and he always sort of pauses to consider, has he finally hit that unbreakable foundation? And you can use a metaphor of, well, it's like building any building. What people do when they're building something big is they'll try to pick a place where they think it's going to not fall over, and then they'll check the soil and see, well, is this soil stable? And if it's just dirt, and you're trying to build a skyscraper, you're you should probably find something more solid. So Descartes is kind of digging down to look for bedrock. Have you ever wondered why places like New York, etc., why they have such big skyscrapers, places like Tallahassee don't? One reason is money, obviously. The other is, of course, if you build a building too big in Florida, on sand, it would tend to fall over. And our big cities follow bedrock areas because they can hold the weight of the massive structures so they don't fall over. And so geography determines building size. Oh, and also money. That makes a huge difference. So he digs down and he says, okay, my senses deceive me, so dig, 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 dig. And then he's scooping away like the dirt of the senses, and then he pauses. He says, well, okay, maybe I found something solid. What's this potentially solid thing? Well, yeah, I can be deceived about particular things. I put the straw in the glass, or I see what seems to be water on the road, or I think I see my friend, in the distance, but it's someone else that just kind of looks like them. But general things I can't be wrong about. That I'm here in this room, here in Tallahassee, in this classroom, that stuff's got to be true. And so he pauses. But then, of course, he quickly realizes, it's like tapping with a shovel, like, this seems pretty solid. And he's like, oops, and he breaks through. And then he's kind of falling again. So why the fall? Well, he brings up the dream argument here, because what could be deceiving him in general is that now he's just dreaming. That, to use the example here, that you're not really in a classroom, you're just dreaming. It seems like this is happening, but you wake up and go, oh, what an awful nightmare. So maybe he's just asleep. But then he lands again and thinks, okay, maybe I found something solid. He says, dreams are kind of, well, we all have dreams. They're kind of like fuzzy and incoherent and not super clear. And eventually you kind of like wake out of them and realize, oh, I was just dreaming. So maybe there is a way to distinguish between dreaming and awake. So probably not dreaming here, because it's been pretty consistent for quite a long time. And if it were a dream, like weird stuff would be happening. Maybe like flamingos or Trump or giant squirrels or something, or a giant squirrel flamingo Trump would show up and things would go crazy. But then, just when he thought it was safe, he realizes that the floor has fallen out from him again, and the fall is this. He says, yeah, maybe dreams are kind of like fuzzy, but he says, he's applying that absolute doubt. So there's even the slightest chance that it's not true, that's enough for his doubt, because he has to find undoubtable beliefs. And his reasoning here is this, that there's nothing that is certain that shows you with 100% certainty that you are not dreaming. Because, as far as you know, in the next 4 minutes, weird stuff could be happening, and even if it doesn't, maybe there's still just a really, really boring, really stable dream. Now, this is the sort of problem that was addressed in the movie Inception. You saw the Leonardo DiCaprio film, and the dream spy guys, whatever the hell's going on in that movie, still have no idea. They would have like little tokens, and he had a little top that he would spin, and that way he would somehow know whether he was dreaming or awake. And what they're trying to do in a clever way is solve that problem. And the idea of being, of course, is if you spin the top, and if you're awake, eventually, because of gravity, inertia, eventually you'll run out of energy and just topple over. But if you're dreaming, it can spin forever. And of course, at the end of the movie, it's shown that he's like gotten all his dreams have come true, and then you see I think the final scene is you see the little top just spinning and spinning and spinning and not stopping. And so the idea is it could be still just a dream. Now, it was a good effort, but no, it doesn't solve the problem. Why? Well, because if you spin a top, you could just dream that it falls over. You don't have control over the top. And so you can say, well, yep, seems totally real, but that could be your dream. Why would the top have to spin forever? Why would everything else be the same except that top? Why would it work that way? And of course, even if the top kept spinning, you couldn't be sure you were in a dream, because there could be some other explanation for why it kept spinning. It could be some other weird gravitational field. So you would immediately, like, oh, the top is not spinning, I must be dreaming. You'd probably start thinking, well, maybe there's some type of other explanation. And if it spun forever, you'd probably try to wire it up to a power plant and have infinite power forever. You never have to pay, you never have to pay for electricity again. Infinite top. So Yeah, I mean, the whole point of the movie was, again, finding a sure sign, finding that talk. But we don't have that. We have nothing that proves to us with absolute certainty that we are awake. Now, in dreams, you might say, yeah, if it's all weird and stuff, okay, probably dreaming. But right now, there's nothing that's happening that seems like a dream, but we still can't be 100% sure that we're awake. Again, because the standard is not we're probably awake, which we probably are. It's that we got to be 100% certain, to be zero doubt. Now then he tries again, thinks, okay, maybe I can find another foundation. And like all philosophers, he likes analogies, because who doesn't? And the analogy is a painter analogy. And he says, and he kind of runs it through several levels, but the gist is this. He says, maybe dreams are like paintings, where, and he gives the example of like a painting of, say, like a griffin, which is eagle and lion, or, a hippogriff, which is a horse and an eagle, or like a mermaid, or some such thing, encompassing creatures. And he says, maybe dreams are like paintings, where, like, we do a painting of a centaur, horses are real, humans are real, centaurs aren't, but the parts that make them up are real. So maybe dreams work the same way, that the combinations may not be true, but the basic parts are real. And he keeps pushing this. He says, well, maybe, going with like the centaur example, yeah, maybe centaurs aren't real, but horses and humans are, but then maybe horses aren't real nor humans. But he says, surely, like at the smallest level, surely the colors that make them up have to be real, like the smallest bits. So what he's trying to claim here is that the really simple and more universal things, like he says here, corporeal nature, extension, figure, quantity, location, and time, those things have got to be real. So just like with a painting, you could have a fictional painting, completely fictional painting, but the parts that make it up, the bits, have to be real. And he says likewise for a dream. The dream can't be entirely fiction. There's got to be the pieces that make it up have to be real. So this room could all be just the delusion, but the colors, time, shape, etc., that stuff is all real somewhere. Counting as a real foundation. Now, again, this is to kind of like make it seem maybe more plausible, appealing. Think about how people often explain dreams. That the idea is like you see all stuff during the day, watch a movie or something, and then you have a dream, and it takes pieces of your day sometimes and puts them together in weird ways. And so sometimes when you have a dream, you can recognize, oh yeah, that came from that movie, or it came from that house, or some such thing. Distorted and weird versions of it, you can often point to where the parts of the dream came from. And so Descartes says, okay, maybe I'm dreaming, but at least I can be sure about the, components. Now, one impact this has is all sciences dealing with composite things would be dubious. This would be, well, one example would be biology, because according to Descartes, all the dream we have of like living creatures, that could all be just dreams. That you can't be sure about biology because maybe your biology books are like dream books about dream creatures. Likewise, astronomy you couldn't be sure about because maybe there are no stars or planets, and you're just dreaming, you're giving dream astronomy about dream planets. But the most simple things would still be sure. Now, again, this would be kind of a bad scenario because you can't be sure about physics, biology, chemistry, etc. But you could be sure about at least something. So it wouldn't be like total doubt. So he gets to his almost final polish. He says, okay, then what could we absolutely trust no matter what? And he says, math, geometry, and logic. Whether you're awake or asleep, 2 + 2 is 4, squares have 4 sides, etc. And at this point, it would seem to be where he should stop, because he gets to math and logic, these seem absolutely certain, and so even if you're dreaming about this classroom, you can count the desks. And if you add them together, even if there's no desks, even if you're counting your made-up things, the numbers are still correct. And if you draw like a dream triangle, it's still got 3 sides, even though it's in the dream. And Descartes probably should have stopped here. But no, he's going to push it as far as it can go. So then he goes to part 3, which is the demon part, but he begins with God. So he starts off believing that God exists and God created it, and he ends up there. Spoiler alert, he ends up believing in God. Now, how does this lead to doubting math, etc.? Well, here's how the doubt starts to slide. How does he know that all that he's experiencing is actually real? It could all be a deception. Now he pauses and says, well, God's supposed to exist, God's supposed to be good, and a good God wouldn't allow me to be deceived about stuff. But does God allow us to be deceived at least sometimes? Yeah. And so he says, well, if God allows us to be deceived sometimes, God can allow us to be deceived all the time. So it's kind of like if someone murders people sometime, they murder people all the time. Because if they're willing to do it sometime, I'm not saying God's murdered people, I'm just saying that if something is allowed, sometime it can be allowed all the time. So he ends up saying, maybe God is just allowing me to be deceived about everything. So let's make it worse. So the final step, he says, well, let's go beyond this. Let's imagine not God, but some evil demon, an evil genius, who's deceiving me about everything. Absolutely everything. And so nothing can seemingly be trusted. So how's he going to bring up doubt about math and, logic, etc.? Well, to support him here, we can use a couple examples. I'll use one movie. There's a old movie, classic, good movie, called Memento. And the idea, if you haven't seen the movie, there's a person whose wife was murdered, and during the incident, they suffered a head injury, and so they can remember everything up to that event, but after that, they can't form any long-term memories. And that may seem wildly impossible, but that's actually a real thing. There are people who actually do have that condition. In some forms of dementia, people have that. They can remember things from 40 years ago, but they can't remember where they live now. And so the main character, he's seeking his wife's killer, so what he does is he gets his clues tattooed on him, because that way he's always got them, he can look at them, but he forgets things every few minutes. So he's trying to find her killer, but he just can't remember stuff for more than a few minutes. Now, imagine a person was in that circumstance where something could mess with their memory. They couldn't remember stuff, or something could screw their memory. Well, imagine if you're trying to count the sides of a square. Now, normally think it'd be easy, 1, 2, 3, 4. But what if your memory was screwed with every time? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so you just keep on counting. Now we think, well, that can't happen. Yeah, because we think our memories were fine. But if our memories are messed with, and we're trying to do proofs, we'd have to remember the steps that we went through that we can't yet see. In other words, kind of like to use another analogy, think of trusting someone. To trust somebody now, you'd have to remember correctly that you trusted them in the past, they did good things and you do bad things. But imagine in the superhero or sci-fi or horror movies where someone could change your memories. So you've never met them, but now you have all these memories of how trustworthy they are. But they're actually a monster, because Halloween's coming up. Well, in that case, you'd feel like you could trust them perfectly, but those would all be false memories. Likewise, you could think that something was absolutely true, like a proof, but something could be just screwing with your memories. It could all be wrong. And so Descartes brings it up, maybe this evil demon is just screwing with me, and everything's screwed up. So at this point, you think he would just stop and say, we're screwed, science is screwed, we're done. But what he ends up doing is saying this in meditation one. We'll close here. He says, even though everything happening could be the result of the evil genius, he believes, perhaps incorrectly, that he still has a power left, which is this. He can suspend judgment, and he still has the power to avoid believing anything that's false. So in meditation 1, he's basically in free fall, where everything can be in doubt, but his way out is he thinks he still has the ability to not believe things that are false. Now, of course, if he really wanted to push it, he could just say, well, the demon can make him believe whatever. Then he'd totally be screwed and there'd be no way out. So we'll see next time how Descartes and others try to get out of this problem of the evil demon. So have a good rest of the day. I'll see you on the Halloween.